Wow, look at that.
We were hot on the trail of a mystery. A detective story, one that starts under the sea, a few thousand years before Jesus, and ends with a small blue string tied to the end of the world. According to Jewish tradition, God commanded that these strings must be dyed blue, a sacred blue called techelet. The blue string was to remind the Israelites of the sea of the sky, and the sky of God's holy throne. And the commandment says the blue must come from the blood of a sea creature called the Hillazon. But over 1,000 years ago, the secret of the Hillazon was lost. And that is the heart of our mystery. Which animal is the Hillazon? We have just a few clues from ancient Hebrew texts.
Its body resembles the ocean. It has bones and cartilage. It carries a shell.
And it has legs in its head.
He shoots them out,
Very
grabs
long. Grabs his prey.
Over 1,000 years ago, war racked the Holy Land. The secret guild that made the sacred blue died out.
It was gone, faded, disappeared.
And the memory of how to make the biblical blue faded into history. The trail went cold until the 1880s, when a man who was part cowboy, part Sherlock Holmes, and all Polish rabbi rode out of the north on a quest for the Hillazon. He was called the Redziner Rebbe. The Rebbe was a great man of science, and he developed a recipe that produced blue, the sacred techelet, from none other than
The cuttlefish.
And that's where we left off last time. This might seem like a complicated tale, but when I met Tel Aviv rabbis Yitzchak and Shlomo Englard, I kept the question simple. Why are these strings so important?
Now, why do we put tzitzit on the corner? Because it says in Kabbalic books that a person, when he's going on the corner, when he's on the border, then he needs to be watched. He needs a reminder of the one above.
Oh, when he's at the edge.
He's at the edge.
The edge, the border, a place of mystery. The edge of a garment is the border between us, our flesh, our nakedness, and the rest of the world.
The notion that techelet, for instance, has the blue edges raises all sorts of interesting questions.
Simon Wagemakers co-founded the Canadian Textile Museum.
The center of the garment belonging to the spiritual, and the edge of this touching the realm of the physical.
But the edge is the connection between you and the outside world,
Right.
spiritual. I never understood that because you actually have strings at the corners. I noticed that in Minoan, in Egyptian, in many ancient cultures, you have these strings. And the hem becomes the hem of a garment, becomes very, very important right through history.
It's everywhere in the world. I mean, the edges of garments are tremendously important.
He will look at the tzitzit. He'll remind himself there's somebody above, somebody watching you. You connect yourself to God. You look at the blue thread. You remind yourself of God.
The color blue lies near the border between visible and invisible, the end of what our eyes can see. Blue is visible just this side of ultraviolet, which is invisible.
You have to do what God commanded you to do. So that's why it's so important, the techelet, the blue thread, to be on the talit.
It's a connection.
It's a connection.
Blue strings are a connection between earth and heaven, the soul's borderlands. And borders are often disputed. This one is, Yitzchak and Shlomo believe the sacred blue comes from a cuttlefish. Others disagree. We only know what the Hillazon is by a list of criteria. How does
The cuttlefish.
add up?
Its body resembles the ocean. It has bones and cartilage. It carries a shell.
And it has legs in its head. But there are other creatures that might fit this description.
Murex trunculus, the snail.
Baruch Sturman believes the Hillazon is not a cuttlefish. He thinks it's a snail. But there's one problem if you're trying to get blue from a snail, and it takes us back to chemistry.
You're left with a big problem, and that's that it doesn't give you the right color.
It gives you purple.
Gives you purple. About 30 years ago, the answer was found in a pretty serendipitous way by someone by the name of Otto Elsner. Because of the smell, the wonderful smell of the snail dying, he was asked to go and do his work outside, not in the laboratory. And
Nobody wanted him
nobody
around.
wanted the snail or Otto Elsner
Smell
to
like
do it.
rotten
It
eggs or
smells very bad.
Archaeologists had long known that the ancients used snails to make purple. Not blue, purple. Dyers stewed thousands of snails in giant vats over several days. It stank to high heaven, but that stink turned out to be one of the most important clues for making the leap from purple to blue.
It stunk like anything.
Zvi Koren is a Tel Aviv chemist specializing in ancient colors.
I'm not joking at all.
What would it, like skunky or rotten eggs?
Like
or-
garlic, fermenting, rotting meat. Think of it. These are sea snails. These are living things, meat, fleshy meat. They're not living anymore, but you have flesh that is sitting in a pot of this size, letting it ferment. Odors, gases
This is
coming off.
disgusting.
Very disgusting.
Does the Talmud talk about the smell?
As a matter of fact, the Talmud says that if a woman marries a man who becomes a dyer after they're married, she may ask to be divorced from him because of the smell.
That's
And-
how bad the smell
Well,
was. Even then.
I mentioned that I used to do this and come home to my wife when she was pregnant, and I used to come home smelling of snails, and she used to go and throw up. That was the way we had a year of our marriage. Throughout the whole pregnancy, it was that way.
And yet-
I'd come home, she'd throw up.
Stink.
An ancient Egyptian papyrus records that dyers stank of fish.
Okay, so
Okay, so this
Elsner,
one.
Elsner is
Elsner-
asked, he's working on this stuff.
Exactly.
He's smelly. All his co-workers say, get out of here. He goes outside.
And he found an interesting fact that happened.
Oh, I can see it now.
On cloudy days, when he was doing his dye work, he got this purple. On sunny days, he got a perfect sky blue.
Cloudy days, purple.
Sunny days, blue. And he made the connection
It's
that
like
there was
penicillin here. So.
very much so. If the dye is exposed to ultraviolet light, it will become blue as opposed to purple.
The main colorant here is called dibromo indigo. And it, as the name implies, it's indigo, but with 2 bromine atoms attached to it. When it's exposed to the sunlight, the 2 bromine atoms are knocked out. The sunlight can break a bond, and the sunlight breaks the bond between the indigo molecule and the bromine.
This is an atomic process.
This is an atomic process, absolutely. As they're knocked out of the colorant, when you introduce your string or your fleece to dye, what's left behind is mostly, not completely, but mostly indigo, which gives you blue.
Blue.
That's right.
So they had to split the atom to get the tchelet.
You're very good.
Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. They knew how to split the atom
Well, before Einstein. right?
before Einstein.
So I guess in the old days, you could control the process by saying, I'm going to produce a vat of purple inside, and I'm going to produce a vat of blue outside.
Right, right. And they probably knew a lot more about this. This is a dye. This was the major center of the economy in the Middle East and in the Mediterranean in general. And they did this for thousands of years.
Are these guys crazy? Modern day Don Quixote is tilting at windmills, looking for some little animal called a Hillazon so they can extract some dye out of it and get biblical blue so that they can fulfill a biblical commandment that hasn't been fulfilled in over 1,000 years? I don't think so. I actually think they're onto something. Throughout history, what we wore said a lot about who we were. And not just the clothing, the color. And it's not just the biblical blue that we forgot. Generally, we've forgotten the power of color.
Because of the invention of synthetic dyes in the 19th century were assaulted by all sorts of colors that previously
A
wouldn't.
guy
There
like
you
me
are.
can walk around like, look at me. So we've actually lost the sense of.
We've lost our sensitivity to color. I mean, in many societies, as a person approached you, you could tell from the color that they were wearing.